Hi, it's Alison for the Law School Toolbox and the Bar Exam Toolbox. Should you apply for jobs while you're studying for the bar exam? We've got ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones here with us to talk about that very question. Welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. Well, this was actually based on a listener's question, and we thought it was a really good topic because it's actually a bit tricky. What do you think about applying for jobs while studying for the bar exam?
I'll be honest, it is not an ideal situation. And I agree, it's sort of just like a tricky situation. Because you need to be focused on your bar prep, right?
Yeah.
Because that's always going to be the most important thing. In the same way that I tell law students, you need to focus on your grades, versus applying for jobs. So, it's not for everybody, but I also think that there are certain situations where you need to be doing it at the same time, and you're just going to have to be honest about it also.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is there are a lot of questions that people kind of get worked up about, because oftentimes this is people who are applying for jobs after failing the bar and they're studying again. So, you got out of school, you took the bar, you thought that you were going to pass. So maybe you waited to really focus on the job hunt until after you took the test. So maybe you've even been applying and then you got your results and your results were not passing. So now you're in a situation where you're going to have to take usually the February exam. By the time you get the results for that, it's going to basically be a year since you graduated. Student loans are coming due. There's a lot going on here.
Or I think you also might be a 3L, right, who didn't get a job offer.
Right.
So you're also in a difficult situation.
Right.
Because, obviously it's easier to already have the job offer, even though they don't know you're going to pass the bar either if you already have the job offer, right?
Well, and that's a whole different question because then those people end up in a situation where they get one more chance, and if they don't pass, they're going to lose the jobs. Nobody's really in a great situation.
I was going to say, don't think it's so easy for everybody else too, because they have a lot of pressure, if they feel like they absolutely have to pass, this one to keep this amazing job that they got. So there's pressure for everybody. But if you're in this situation, right, you didn't have that set job while studying for the bar, you don't have anyone paying for it, I'm guessing, versus them. So that's, a lot of pressure too. The thing is, they know what's going on generally. So you trying to pretend like it's not going on is not going to be helpful. So if they're talking to you, they understand you either, failed and are taking it again, or you didn't have a job offer and you will need to, take and pass the bar. So there's no hiding this is the thing.
Yeah, sometimes I think people get really worked up about, well, what if I don't tell people I'm taking the bar and then I get an offer and they want me to start like right before the exam? And I'm like, well, that's probably just not a great position to be in. I'm not saying you have to like splash it on your resume that, hey, I didn't pass the bar the first time I took it, so now I'm studying again. I mean, but if somebody asks you directly, I think you should tell them, like, yeah, I'm taking, you don't have to necessarily tell them you failed. I mean, I wouldn't lie about that either. But again, I wouldn't necessarily bring it to the table unless somebody asked me directly. But yeah, I don't think you want to put yourself in a position where they would expect you to start, say, mid-January. And then you do that. I mean, if you do that, you're probably not going to pass the exam. And if you can't do that, then you've got an awkward conversation. So, I mean, like I said, I just think the whole thing is a little tricky. But if people do want to do it, I think being honest about, the fact that you're studying for the exam, I think most people understand.
I agree with you. And I am always, very ethical about things, and I never think you should lie. I think it's okay to say I'm taking the February, 2025 exam. I agree with you. You don't need to directly say you failed unless they ask.
Right.
That's not necessary. They probably will ask.
Or they'll just assume.
Yeah, exactly. So that is what it is. But I would be upfront with that. You cannot start a job in January and then there's no point in taking the February exam. That just seems like a disaster.
Yeah.
I don't really think they would ask. I don't think that would make sense for them either, generally. So, there might be other great things on your resume. There may be something great about this job that makes you, worth taking the risk that you haven't taken or passed the bar exam. So don't count yourself out that there isn't a possibility that you can get a job. I just think you need to be realistic that, yeah, you're not the ideal candidate.
Well, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of people will basically say that to some extent and say, well, we might be interested in you, but we need your bar results. And it all kind of goes back to what you alluded to at the beginning, which is if you're really seriously studying for the bar exam, that needs to be the highest priority. So, any applications, I think if you have extra time, it's fine to send off a few or maybe even do some networking, go to some events, start meeting some people, maybe make a list of places that you'd really enjoy working, and start applying for them as soon as you finish the exam. I mean, because that's also the post exam period is a little tricky too, because you don't know yet if you pass. So, even though you've taken the test, if you do apply, are you gonna get the job and then they fire you if you fail? I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts here.
I agree with you. I think networking is probably the best thing to do in this situation because I think that's where you could kind of get people to like you and
Right.
want to, let's revisit this when you get your results. I think
Yeah.
it's much more likely they're going to say when we get your results than after you finish the exam, like we just talked about, because they want you to have passed also.
Right, and I
Uh,
think at that point, at least you don't have to focus on the exam itself, so at least you have more time that you could start applying places, just with the expectation that if it's an actual JD required position, they're probably not gonna say yes until you can present your JD, and bar results, and you are fully qualified as an attorney.
so this was the other thing I was going to say. And obviously, this depends on where you're at, but maybe you want to look at jobs that don't require the bar while still you're going to take it and down the line you want a job that requires the bar. But maybe you say to yourself, I'm going to apply to those now and I'm going to take a job that doesn't require the bar now because I need a job or I need the money. Hopefully your law school degree will still help you. We have talked about lots of jobs that fit that category. So that's another thing to think about. And then once you hopefully pass and are admitted, then you can look later on.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think, people have to be a little realistic about getting a job that requires them to be barred when they're not actually barred. I mean, yeah, places will take just because of the way the system is structured, firms particularly will take a chance on people who are summer associates and give them a job offer with the expectation they will pass the exam. Outside of that universe, I mean, I guess if you have a fellowship or clerkship, like those jobs are still there for you, but those are less permanent anyway. But I mean, somebody who runs a small firm is not like they can't just bring on someone with the expectation they might pass. So I just think you have to be realistic. And I think those JD preferred jobs are a good option as long as you're clear about the fact that you can't start until after the exam.
And maybe there is a small firm where they'll hire you to do something,
Right.
right? That's going to be lower level and less, it's going to pay less. But maybe your JD will help you and you can do some research and learn some things and then, make some contacts and maybe they will give you, the real associate job later. So I think that's a possibility.
Yeah, exactly. You can essentially be like a glorified paralegal for
Hmm.
somebody with the expectation that, well, when you pass, we can reevaluate your role. You just don't know what's out there. I think sometimes, when you've just graduated, it's easy to fall into the trap of like, oh, well, if I can't do X, then there's no point in doing anything. But really, anything is better than nothing. I mean, and, somebody who sometimes comes to me and says, well, I really need the money like right now. And that's fine, but in that case, like, maybe postpone taking the bar. Like, doing both at once is just kind of setting yourself up for failure in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people say things and you just think, okay, you can't have all those things.
Right, like, this is
So,
not we have to choose which of these is gonna be the focus. So,
yeah.
if you really truly need the money, and we've had students that absolutely were in that situation where they're like, "I need, to work to pay my bills," but they didn't try to study for the bar and, get a tutor and all of that on top of it. They actually just worked, in some cases, completely non-legal related jobs for 6 months or a year, and then came back with savings where they could actually focus and spend the 2 to 3 months studying and pass the bar and then set themselves up for a much better job. But I think, I think that required a lot of clarity to actually understand that this is a better path, even though it might put me 6 months or a year for my goal of passing the bar. But I know that I'm not going to be in position to do both. And just being realistic, I think, about, what your kind of options are here is really important.
And it's just a waste of money also to be not fully studying and all over the place and probably not passing that bar and having to do it again. It's like, why bother? Postponing it for 6 months or a year seems like a cheaper, smarter option, even if it puts you behind.
Right. I think also, that makes it more feasible for you to take a job that maybe
Yeah.
doesn't actually require bar results. Because if you could do that and you mentally even commit to it for a year, okay, that's fine. Nobody's going to look askance at you for leaving a job after a year. But if you take the job for 3 months and then quit and then take another one for, another 3 months when you find out you didn't pass, stuff like that starts to look a little, I don't know about that on a resume.
I agree. You need sort of a plan about, what you're going to do if you are going to take, a non-bar job. I also think it's a big red flag. Don't tell someone like, "Oh, I'm taking this bar. I'm very sure I'm going to pass." Like, you don't need to
Hey, I would
worry about
never
it.
say that.
But
Anyone can fail.
yeah, don't ever say that. People say that. Uh, don't make any promises. But I do think being upfront about your plan actually makes you look sort of better and more with it. I am taking this bar exam. You know what I mean? And I am currently studying. Make it sound like you're taking the whole thing seriously. I think sounds better than trying to hide anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Now I go back to I think the networking is probably going to be the most beneficial aspect here, more so than just randomly applying to jobs, because it's going to raise a lot of questions. And, what employer is necessarily going to say, oh, well, this person may or may not be able to do the job, but I'm going to go ahead and hire them now. It's like, no, nobody's going to do that. Lawyers are risk averse. They're going to say, oh, you seem great. If you pass the exam and we still have a position available, we'd love to talk with you. But I don't know. I don't feel like most people are going to hire somebody that they need to be admitted at this point.
Yeah, I just can't think of a reason.
Yeah, it's just not probably not happening.
I don't know, unless you have a special skill. For example, the one exception might be if you want to be a patent prosecutor and you have all those technical skills,
Well,
there's
to
a
be a
chance.
patent prosecutor, you don't actually need to be admitted to the
Right,
bar.
that's
You need to
true.
be admitted to the patent bar. So something like that could absolutely make sense. Like, oh, I'm admitted to the patent bar, so I can do the work, and then I'm gonna, I'm studying for the actual bar exam, and then, I can be a patent, do other things as well. Something like that absolutely can make sense. But yeah, there has to be something there where it makes sense for them to pay you whatever they're offering to pay you before you're actually a lawyer.
Those are the only people I know because it's oh, they do want you to have the regular bar exam later, but they'll
Yeah.
take a big risk on you because there are not that many people who meet all the criteria for that.
Right.
So
Yeah,
think about that.
exactly.
Yeah.
You happen to be eligible for admission to the patent bar, but of course, if you haven't already taken the patent bar,
Yeah.
probably too late to do that first. Um, yeah, so these are all things I think it just has to make sense. And if the reality is what makes sense for you right now is really focusing on the bar exam and doing everything in your power to pass that, then that's what you should be doing.
And I know it's not the best answer that anyone wants to hear, I really want to find a job while I'm studying, but sometimes there isn't an answer that's just, okay, you can do that. It's just that's unlikely. So,
But it's like, yeah, good luck with that.
yeah.
I mean, I definitely knew people who, while they were studying, were working on the side as a bartender or something. There's no shame in doing that as long as it isn't 3 a.m. and you can't get home before then and you can't study. As long as you can find something. I mean, all kinds of things can work out that are relatively available types of jobs if you just need to make some money. Depending on your skill sets, you've got all kinds of options these days with, Uber and dog walking and nannying and who knows what, take your pick. But yeah, for finding an actual JD required, bar admission required job while you're studying, I have to say, I think it's pretty unlikely.
And I understand why, if you're in this situation, your pride might take a hit.
Yeah.
and it's hard. So I would acknowledge that, and just say, okay, this is, how I'm going to have to do it. And it's not all the things I wanted, but I'm going to get to where I want to get to. It's just not going to be at the exact timeline I expected to.
Well, I think there are a lot of things you can do to position yourself for a really solid job search when the time is right. So, make sure that all of your documents are super perfected. Have a really solid list of places that you want to apply that you've researched, and maybe try to do some informational interviews or think about people in your network that you know. You can have everything aligned to hit the ground absolutely running. And I think that's probably a better use of people's time than just applying to things that they happen to see, like, on the internet.
I totally agree. Also, have all your stuff into the bar that you need to get
True.
admitted, because there is no excuse for that. Whether or not you passed, like, don't let that be the thing. Oh, it took forever to get admitted because I didn't have my, moral character stuff in.
Right, and also the MPRE, like, if you haven't passed the MPRE, you go ahead and get that taken care of. But, yeah, the moral character, absolutely. I mean, I was guilty of that. My first exam, I just was I couldn't decide where to take the bar, so my stuff was in late, and, like, the judge I was working for wanted to have a little ceremony to admit me and the other clerk, and I was like, "I don't sign off on moral character yet." So he had to go make some phone calls. Luckily, it was a small state bar where they were like, "All right, fine, we'll, like, expedite the review of your personal clerk so that you can, like, admit her." But it was like, he was like, "What? Why didn't you do this?" I was like, "I don't know. I just didn't do it." So don't be that person.
Yeah, be prepared with anything that you can do ahead of time and get yourself there, 'cause hopefully you
Yeah.
do pass.
Yeah, basically, you want is the minute you find out that you passed and you open that letter, open that email, and you're like, "Okay, this is great. I can move on." All the pieces should be in place to do that as quickly as possible so that you're not then saying, "Oh, well, what should I put on my resume?" It should just be like, "Admitted to the bar,
Bar
X date,
number,
done."
yeah.
Exactly.
I will say I get suspicious even, someone says that they passed the bar, but they're not admitted, and I look at how much
Mm,
time has gone by. So
right.
that comes up too, even for people who have passed who are looking for jobs, and you need to be able to explain that.
Right. I mean, and sometimes that might just be an oversight that you don't
Mhm.
realize that you really should just put your bar number or at least, admitted in California and New York, on your resume with a date. Yeah, because that just you start to wonder like, oh, is something going on with the moral character?
Yeah.
Like what's happened? What's happened? And maybe it's nothing. Like it might just be literally that you didn't realize.
And don't make it hard for the person to have to, like, look you up, that you are, barred.
Right. I mean, yeah, because if you're not, people are
Yeah.
going to find out. Like this is all public record.
Yes, again, you have to be honest about all of it, and it's all obvious. Like, it really is. Like, we're gonna know.
Right, and, yeah, sometimes we'll see resumes where, like, somebody didn't they say they're admitted, like, on a certain date or something, and you kinda wonder, like, "Well, you graduated here, and then it was 2 years later," and, like, again, like, people don't pass the exam or maybe something else is going on, but there are kind of ways to do it that just raise questions and ones that don't really raise the same questions.
And the worst is that they ask you directly, right? Like,
Yeah,
or they say, "Have you failed the bar?"
and you say,
It's like,
"No," and
or
you
you just
did.
say, "Oh, I passed the bar in X state." If they
Yeah.
asked you, "Have you failed the bar before?" You need to answer that question honestly.
Right, and I think with anything in the legal profession, if somebody asks you directly, you need to answer the question truthfully and completely. If they don't ask you
Yeah.
directly, then you don't have to put it out there. Like, you don't need to put on your resume that it took you 4 times to pass the bar. But if somebody asks, you know, tell them. And again, like, people understand that things happen.
Mm.
So, everybody in the legal profession knows the bar exam is kind of a big deal and easy to fail for anyone at least once. So it's not like it's gonna be disqualifying. But if they find out you lied about it, definitely gonna be disqualifying.
But you're absolutely right. There's a difference between lying and just not sharing information, and anyone who's a lawyer will tell you that.
Right. And the same thing with the moral character, like you need to be honest on that, or otherwise you're gonna cause yourself problems and possibly delay your application or maybe never get admitted, and that would be a disaster. So, you know, always be honest and
Yeah.
truthful and but don't volunteer things that you don't necessarily need to volunteer. And I think applying in the middle of taking the exam for the second or third time almost kind of invites those type of questions in a way that just getting it done with and passing would not.
I totally agree. I actually think it's a good idea if you are in one of those situations. I would have different people look at your resume and ask them if they have questions or how they,
Right.
like see
How they
what
read it.
see what stands out. Because if they're like, I would be real confused about this part, then find a way to make it not like that, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think this is a tricky question. Maybe we didn't even really answer it to the satisfaction of the person who asked it, who maybe was hoping for better news. But, I think getting your ducks in a row, getting everything ready to go, and then really focusing and making sure this is the last time you take the exam and doing whatever is necessary to get to that point is probably ultimately going to be put you in a better position than trying to do both of these things at once. Do you
And
have
we
any
want to
final
give
thoughts?
honest advice. It's the
Right.
same thing when someone's like, "Oh, I have to work in big law." And I look at their, stuff and I'm like, "Well, you're not going to right now." You
Right. That's
know?
not gonna be your first stop, at
Yeah.
least.
So it's like I can't answer that question the way you want. Or you can apply, but I don't think you'll get any interviews. But let's talk about how you can get there eventually.
Right. I think sometimes being a little more patient and just
Mhm.
playing the long game can be more effective than trying to do everything at once, but then doing everything poorly. Because what if you distract yourself and then you fail again? Like, that's just not
Mhm.
going to be great.
No, and I mean, this happens to people even who have set jobs, right? And then, like you said, they
Ugh,
get another
I hate
chance to
that.
take it.
And
And
then,
I
oh,
always say, you may need to take unpaid leave, or, some firms are like, you have to take this amount of time off. Do that. Take that time off. Do not try to work. It's not impressive. And failing the second time, you're going to lose your job. So your priority is always passing the bar, even if you have a job.
no, that's so true. And sometimes I talk to people and they say, oh, well, and it's so expensive to hire a tutor. I'm like, what is it going to cost you to
Hmm.
not have this job? Come on, get it together.
Yeah.
Take the unpaid leave, pay for somebody to help you. You were talking about losing a very highly paid job because you didn't take the time and spend the money to pass this test. Like, come on.
And most
Yeah.
firms really do recognize that. Like they will find someone to fill in for you where you need
Yeah.
to. Be responsible about it and make sure that everyone knows what you need and when you will be off. But you should be off and the bar is your priority.
Yeah, and I think the firms are very, very clear with people about that, and sometimes I feel like they just do not hear them. I hear people saying, "Oh, well, they told me I could have a month off, so I was gonna get a month paid," and they're like, "But I think I'm only gonna take 2 weeks." I'm like, "Are you out of your mind? Like, what
No,
are
I've
you
had
doing?"
conversations with people where I say, like, this isn't actually optional. Like, we're not having a
Yeah,
conversation where you're deciding how much time. This is what you're taking off.
right. Yeah, I mean, I think you should take any time you can get, basically, because, again, it's a short-term hit for a much longer-term gain, and at that point, if you lose your job and you still have to take the exam again, that is when things start getting really ugly.
Absolutely.
So don't put yourself in that position. Do everything you can to pass. And hopefully then you get a job at the end of all of this. It is a tricky place to be, and we sympathize with you. And nobody wants you to be in this position, but I think you just got to deal with the reality.
I agree.
All right. Any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, yeah, you probably shouldn't be applying for jobs while you're studying for the bar. Unless you, like we've talked about, have sort of a special skill or specific reason you need to. But to me, it just takes your focus away and just do some light networking and kind
Yeah.
of have your plan for the future. But this really isn't going to help you. That's what I would
Yeah.
say.
No, I think that's hard to hear, but I do think it's probably right, is that even though you want to be doing all the things at once, probably not doing all the things at once is going to result in a better end product.
Exactly.
All right. Well, for more career help and the opportunity to work one-on-one with us, including figuring out your job hunt, you can check out careerdicta.com or visit barexamtoolbox.com. Thanks for watching, and please give us a like and subscribe. We'll talk soon.